Tonight, furor in the Muslim community after a school in Halifax forces students of Palestinian heritage to remove their traditional scarf. The students were told the scarf is a sign of war. And thousands of bamboo houses in Cox Bazar in Bangladesh burned to ashes, leaving Rohingya refugees unsheltered once again. It is one of the many fires that engulf the biggest refugee camp in the world. A report examines the Nazification of India. Saleh Farouk from Justice for All Canada shares the details.
The BJP, which is the current governing party in India, is actually one of several organizations through which the RSS promotes this idea of a Hindu Rashtra, or a Hindu totalitarian state.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. I am Catherine Bullock. Park West School in Halifax has singled out its students with Palestinian heritage by forcing them to remove their traditional clothing Wednesday at a multicultural event. The incident led to an uproar in the Muslim community. The Keffiyeh is a traditional black and white checkered cloth with embroidered patterns of olive leaves, fishnet, and a road, representing Palestinian identity and culture. According to the students' parents, their children were forced to take off the keffiyehs. The principal said the garments are a sign of war. On Saturday, Halifax Regional Centre for Education issued an apology for students who felt hurt by the incident. A fire has destroyed 2,000 shelters at a Rohingya refugee camp in southeast Bangladesh on Sunday, leaving around 12,000 people homeless. Bangladesh's refugee commissioner told a media source that the fire rapidly engulfed the bamboo and tarpaulin shelters. At least 35 mosques and 21 learning centres for the refugees were also destroyed. There are no reports of any injuries or deaths. The blaze was brought under control in less than 3 hours. It is not clear how the fire started. Fires are common in the camps where nearly 1 million Rohingya refugees live in squalid conditions. Faith and community groups are coming together to help the vulnerable in Edmonton by providing food and wellness kits. This Sunday, volunteers from the Muslim Association of Canada, Human Concern International, Bent Arrow, and McDougall United Church provided wellness kits for needy Edmontonians in the downtown area. 200 bowls of chili were also prepared. The chair of the Council for McDougall Church began sharing its space last year with the Muslim Association of Canada to cater for their prayer needs. The church's vision is to create a community hub that can aid a greater number of people through cooperative ventures. A new report released Wednesday examines the plight of temporary foreign migrant workers employed in the seafood industry in New Brunswick. The report interviewed 14 migrant workers on the condition of anonymity. The interviews revealed cramped and poor living conditions, a long commute to work, and workplace abuse. The workers earn $13 per hour and stand at a single spot for 10 hours. The report calls on the federal government to give permanent residency to the workers. A spokesperson for lobster processing plants has dismissed the report. He says the report discredits the whole industry based on the experiences of a few workers. Two reports are raising alarm bells about what is going on in India with respect to its treatment of Muslims, Christians, Dalits, and other minorities. The reports have been released last week. One by Justice for All in the US is titled The Nazification of India. The other, by the National Council of Canadian Muslims and the World Sikh Organization, focus on the connection to Hindu groups in Canada and a Hindu extremist movement in India. Saleh Farouk, Government Relations Manager from Justice for All Canada, talks to us about the issues that these two reports raise for Muslims. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Welcome, Salam. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. You are a regular on the show. We like to amplify the work that you do at Justice for All Canada. And your sister organization in the US, Justice for All, released a report last week called The Nazification of India. It's a very striking and startling title. And I was wondering if you just can explain why the title is chosen.
It's certainly a troublesome title that reflects the situation on the ground. We chose the title to explain what the gist of the report, which is about the Indian government being on a trajectory to becoming a state that's inspired by a Nazi and fascist ideology. And already we're seeing markers of India becoming a majoritarian state through the discrimination and the racism faced by the country's minorities.
We will get to that in a moment, but I just want to, first of all, I should say full disclosure. I was one of the editors on the report, so I'm familiar with its contents, but together we'll, unpack its details for the audience. I want to just focus on the relationship between the current ruling party of India and the right-wing movement that has also been flagged by this report that just came out by the NCCM and the World Sikh Organization. And I'm going to look at my notes because of the pronunciation. The movement is called the Rashtriya Swayam Sewak Sangh movement. We call it the RSS. It's a movement that has ties to the Indian government, the BJP. And I was just wondering if you could explain what those ties are.
Of course, I'll try my best to do so, Dr. Kathy. So the BJP, which is the current governing party in India, is actually one of several organizations through which the RSS promotes this idea of a Hindu Rashtra, or a Hindu totalitarian state. So the BJP was in fact formed to advance these types of political ambitions of the RSS and RSS members. And the BJP has acquired access to power at the national level in India through this general coalition strategy of one Hindu state that minimalizes religious minorities. And that is, in general, the relationship between the RSS and the BJP.
So the ideology that both of them are promoting, you called it Hindu Rashtra. I've also heard the term Hindutva, which is some kind of Hindu supremacist ideology. You could have a supremacist ideology rooted in many different kinds of things, the notion of the nation. Why is it particularly being tagged as Nazi?
That's a great question, and I think this is also a good opportunity to explain that Hindutva entails a nationalist right-wing political movement and ideology that is different from the general religion of Hinduism. It is compared to Nazi ideology simply because of very many parallels and similarities between, at the time, how Nazi regime treated Jews and Jewish people in World War II, and how the BJP government is treating Muslim minorities as well as other religious minorities. A lot of human rights experts as well as NGOs have made those comparisons. And I think the biggest one was by Genocide Watch, which issued 2 genocide alerts for Muslim minorities in India.
Let's unpack then a little bit more the details. I know that the report in the early pages basically it has a table saying these were Nazi policies and these are the BJP, RSS, Hindutva policies. Are you able to just talk to us about what some of those parallels are?
Absolutely. As you know, it is quite a lengthy report. I do recommend that readers take a little bit of time to go through it, but we can do a general overview of those kind of comparisons. The report does a really good job at giving examples of radicalization between the Nazi regime at the time in World War II and the current BJP government in India. So the biggest one being Muslim minorities are experiencing that same type of quote unquote othering or demonization that the Jewish people that the Jewish population, also faced under the Nazi regime in Germany. Another example is the idea of authoritarianism. So India's BJP party in the government cracks down very hardly on dissent. It does restrict freedom of expression, and it targets people like journalists and activists and students. that are getting the message across, or at least trying to advocate. Similarly, at the time, the Nazi Party also promoted a totalitarian ideology, which did focus on similar state control as well as suppressing any kind of opposition. Another huge example is just propaganda. So both the BJP government and the Nazi Party did use various methods of propaganda to promote ideologies as well as consolidate that power. We see this every day in India through using Indian media outlets and channels to perpetuate negative narratives about minorities, specifically Muslims. And the Indian state also uses these channels to promote messages that are quite nationalistic and xenophobic as well. And lastly, I would maybe mention the general discrimination and persecution. So the United Nations repeatedly implicated the BJP party in India for its treatment of Muslims and other minorities. And the biggest example is the passing of laws and policies that restricts their rights and their freedoms. And similarly, the Nazi Party also enacted numerous laws that justified their persecution of over 6 million Jews, as well as people living with disabilities and other groups that they deemed, quote unquote, undesirable.
One of the things that I found most startling when I was going through the report was the direct praising of Hitler by founders of the RSS in the 1920s. And I believe that the report documents the teaching of Hitler's diary, the Mein Kampf ideology. Are you able to elaborate on that a little?
Of course. So currently in India, the various elected members of the BJP do use their public platforms to promote the quote unquote goodness of Prime Minister Modi. And I think that that was very similar to the propaganda and the various speeches that were made at the time in World War II promoting the leaders of the Nazi regime at the time. And I think that this spread an overall sentiment that influenced extremist groups on the ground to also target and to demonize minorities.
And how shocked should we be that in Indian schools, the RSS is promoting that students read Hitler's Mein Kampf, not as a cautionary tale, but as something to praise and emulate?
I think those of us that are living in the West or in Commonwealth countries or allied nations, it's surprising to us, but in the research that we do, and especially when we connect with impacted people on the ground in India, that's a reality. They're quite used to this, and I think that it's becoming more and more common in terms of spreading that influence. It's a very grassroots movement when it comes to describing the BJP and the way that they work to spread this racist ideology.
Justice for All Canada is having a fundraising dinner in this coming weekend. And I know that the report that has been launched by your sister organisation is going to feature at this event. Tell us a little bit about the fundraising dinner.
Of course. I think that if anyone lives in or around the Greater Toronto area, our benefit dinner will take place on Friday, March 17th in Mississauga. You could get more information by simply logging onto our website. That's justiceforallcanada.org. We'll also have a recognition ceremony for various human rights defenders and activists using their voice to raise raise awareness about these critical issues. And we will be showcasing our impact report, as well as going over various milestones and kind of progress indicators, one of them definitely being this report that was published by our India campaign at our Chicago-based head office.
It's a little bit like a voice crying in the wilderness, it seems, when so many nations want to sign on to India for geostrategic reasons. We're out of time for this interview, but we hope to have you back again in the future to talk more about the work you're doing. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for shining the spotlight. Take care.